Hey everybody, let's talk about what the best way is to find out why the price of Bitcoin moved up or down. If you check the price and you see it's moved largely one way or the other in a relatively short period of time, you might be wondering why. And I figured I'd share my own process with you to figure out, in case it benefits you in figuring out why Bitcoin's price moves. The first thing to remember always is that Bitcoin is just fine. It does not need you. It will be successful with or without you. And there's never a reason to freak out. And in the last 16 years, none of the bad things anyone ever predicted would happen to Bitcoin have ever come to fruition. And so the same as I believe will be true for the next hundreds of years. And so anyway, but let's assume you actually do want to figure out what is happening with the price of Bitcoin. Okay, so the first thing I do is I log into Coinbase and check the price of Bitcoin. By default, it goes to the daily view, which tells you the price in the last 24 hours. So I check that. And then I go over and I flip the little button next to the day view that goes to the monthly view, which gives you just a little bit more perspective, lets you zoom out a little bit. And then sometimes I'll flip over to the yearly view, which gives you even more perspective. So let's assume you do that, and let's call it Thursday or Friday of last week. And you do that and you think, Bitcoin's price dropped, 5% in the course of a day or two. I want to know why. And then you see that it was relatively or somewhat abrupt, as opposed to just like a slow grind down or a slow grind up over a longer period of time, which tells you it's going to be harder to find the reason why if it's just sort of a slow trend. So let's assume you're checking on Thursday or Friday of last week. The price is down like 5%, although it's basically back up now, but let's assume it was still down. And you're checking and you want to find out why. Okay, so the first thing is you check the price. You look at the daily price, then you look at the monthly price, and you realize, wow, it dropped relatively abruptly on Thursday or Friday of last week. Okay, the next thing I do is I flip over to the Stocks app on my iPhone, and I look at the broader stock market, because oftentimes when everybody panics about everything, they sell everything, even though that makes absolutely no sense. Humans have the ability to be very irrational when it comes to fear or greed, especially with regard to financial instruments. So oftentimes you'll flip over and you'll see, wow, the broad stock market got hammered today. Well, guess what? If the whole market got hammered, there's a good chance that Bitcoin got hammered very temporarily as well. Now, Bitcoin tends to recover faster than the broader stock market, and more aggressively. But if everybody is selling everything and everybody is in a panic due to whatever it was, some rate cut decision, rumor that somebody spread about the Federal Reserve or something like that. If everybody's panicking and selling everything, Bitcoin can often get dragged down with that. And sometimes Bitcoin's price is up and you look at the stock market and everybody's just euphoric. So anyway, the Stocks app by default shows the NASDAQ and the S&P 500 and the Dow Jones Industrial Average. If you're interested, I would probably add the Magnificent 7 stocks. You can just Google Magnificent 7 and it'll tell you the Magnificent 7 stocks, which are the 7 highest performing stocks that have basically been carrying the entire S&P 500 for the last, couple years. And if Netflix is not on there, I'd probably add Netflix too. But anyway, Magnificent 7, maybe plus Netflix if that's not part of the Magnificent 7. Just add those to the Stocks app. So what you would have seen if you did that last week is you would have seen that the stock market took a beating on, I think it was Thursday and Friday of last week. And so immediately it tells you, hey, there was blood in the streets. Everybody was panicking and selling everything, which means there's a good chance you're probably not going to find a specific to Bitcoin reason that everybody was selling. They were just selling everything. And irrational humans, when they're selling everything versus buying everything, sometimes that moves the price of everything, even if it's completely uncorrelated. So step 1, you check the price of Bitcoin in Coinbase. Step 2, you check the Stocks app to check the S&P 500, the NASDAQ, and the Dow Jones Industrial Average, and those 3 are already there. I would, again, add the Magnificent 7 just so you get a good sense of sort of the high-flying stocks, what those are up to. Step 3 is I Google the word Bitcoin. I literally flip over to the app, Safari on my iPhone. I type the word Bitcoin and I hit search. And then if I'm trying to figure out what happened to Bitcoin in the last few days, I'll set the search filter to only show me results from the last 1 week. If I have checked the news feeds a bunch in the last couple days and I'm wanting to know what happened in the last number of hours, then I will set the filter to the last 24 hours. And then I will just start reading news headlines. Normally, you will see a news headline from Forbes. I would ignore Forbes. In Forbes, everything is sensational. I mean, everything is an apocalyptic, grand boom, shockwave, tsunami. Their headlines and their reporting is the most ridiculously like bizarre, both good and bad. So every tiny little good thing has bizarre headlines about how good it is, and every little bad thing has bizarre headlines about how bad it is. So you can basically ignore Forbes. Fortune is really good, but Forbes basically sucks. Their reporting is so sensationalistic, it's almost worthless. So you can ignore Forbes. Good reporting on this sort of stuff is typically done by CoinDesk and Cointelegraph. Those are typically the two that do the most sort of fair journalistic reporting is CoinDesk and Cointelegraph. So if there's any sort of news headlines by those two, they'll typically identify what's going on, and you can learn a lot from that. But other than that, I just read the headlines, and then if the headlines are include articles like, why did Bitcoin's price drop 5%? Well, I read the article and try to find out. And anyway, so you can usually find out from the headlines. So I would say on a typical day when the price suddenly moves 3% or 5% or even more, typically I can find out, about half the time I can find out why just by checking the stocks app. And it turns out that everybody was euphoric or everybody was scared in the entire stock, in the entire market for everything that you can buy or sell. If I can't find the answer there, I will basically always go, even if I think, wow, it was euphoric on Wall Street, I still go to, Google, and I just Google the price, the word Bitcoin, and then I set the filter to the last 24 hours or the last 7 days, depending on what time period I'm looking at, and I read headlines. And that will almost always tell me the reason of what's going on. And again, look for headlines that indicate why the price moved, and oftentimes there's articles that you read them and they basically don't tell you anything. Bitcoin traders are constantly predicting prices. So they're, which means oftentimes, articles that are from sort of third tier news sites will say things like, prominent trader predicts $40,000 Bitcoin. Well, then you read the article and you find out what the guy actually said, which is almost always the case, is, the guy does some reporting that says, the price of Bitcoin could drop as low as $40,000, but there could also be a breakout to the upside and it could surpass $70,000 to a new all-time high. So they're basically always predicting both things, a huge fall and a huge rise. And then no matter what the price of Bitcoin does, they call it in their favor. They say, hey, I predicted it was fall. I predicted it would rise. So traders are almost worthless when it comes to predicting what's going to happen with Bitcoin, or because they're always predicting it's going to go both ways, and they just sort of couch it in terminology that doesn't sound completely contradictory. In fact, funny story, I remember back at Baumgar Corporation, one of a very large, multi-billion-dollar company bought one of our competitors, and we thought it was really good for us. And of course, we wanted the analysts that covered our industry to say it was really good for us because we thought it was really good for us. We thought that was the truth. So I remember very distinctly the phone call of getting on the phone with the analyst and asking him, telling him we thought it was really good for us. What did this analyst think? And the analyst said, the way I see it, and this is a direct quote, the way I see this could either be really good for you or really bad for you. Okay, now what sort of a complete BS answer is that? It's either going to be really good or really bad, and then regardless of whether it's good or bad, the analyst is going to say, I called it. I knew it was going to be really good for them. Or if it turned out badly, I knew it was going to be really bad for them. And, of course, they never say it's going to be neutral. But if it is neutral, nobody ever asks them because, who cares? Nobody wants to hear that somebody thought something would be neutral. So anyway, the analysts, oftentimes in news articles, I'll still usually read the news articles to see why, the reasoning they gave. But usually it's just BS where they said the price might go way up or it might go way down. And then it basically tells you nothing. But anyway, so step one, check the price on Coinbase, check the daily price, check the monthly price, check the yearly price to get some perspective. Step two, flip over to the stocks app, check the S&P 500, the Dow, the NASDAQ, all three of which are there by default in Apple. And then I would add the Magnificent Seven stocks plus maybe Netflix. If it's not part of the Magnificent Seven, I can't remember if it is or not. Anyway, then I would flip over to Google. I would Google the price of Bitcoin, or not the price. I would just Google the word, literally, Bitcoin. And then I would look at the news headlines and I would restrict the search to either the last 1 day, or if it's been a few days since I've caught up, the last 1 week. And I would just read, the headlines that try to explain the price. Anyway, so that's my process. Now, typically I will also, once I'm done with that process, I'll flip over to X, formerly known as Twitter, and I follow enough people on there that usually very quickly on Twitter, even faster than on Google, I can figure out what the mood is. I mean, because all the sort of major people that are posting, which like Bitcoin Magazine is probably the most solid thing on Twitter. The Bitcoin Magazine news handle, or the main, I guess, Bitcoin Magazine thing on Twitter is usually really good about just pumping out, legit stuff. So anyway, I'll switch over to X, formerly known as Twitter, and I'll just scroll for, a minute or two. And I can usually find out just by scrolling through the headlines of what people are posting, what happened that resulted in whatever happened in the price. And it's usually not that hard to find out. So anyway, so that's my process. Check price on Coinbase, then flip over to the Stocks app, then flip over to Google the word Bitcoin. And if I still want more, I flip over to Twitter and just scroll a little while, and I can almost always figure out what is happening with the price of Bitcoin. Now, from a more technical level, if you're interested, I'll include a couple bonus things that, you can do if you're sort of a super user and you really want to know. So usually I like to check the mempool, which is super technical. So again, if you're not a super techie person who's super into this sort of stuff, then you can stop listening here, because the rest of the stuff I'm going to talk about is sort of wonky and geeky and sort of not relevant. But anyway, here we go, wonky and geeky. So anyway, I'll flip over to the mempool, which is mempool.space. That's MEMPOOL. Mem as in memory, it stands for memory pool, pool like a thing you swim in. Mempool.space, S-P-A-C-E. So mempool.space shows you a real-time view of the actual Bitcoin blockchain. You can see the blocks being mined. You can see the fee rates for high priority, medium priority, and low priority blocks. So earlier today it was like 24 cents, or usually between like 25 cents and 50 cents to transact on the core Bitcoin blockchain. Obviously, that is not Bitcoin Lightning transactions. Lightning transactions take place above they're a layer 2 on top of the core Bitcoin blockchain. So anyway, I check mempool.space, and that just gives me a good view of what's happening with Bitcoin itself. Now, again, you don't need to do that, but I've just been messing with Bitcoin long enough that it's like the vital signs of the patient, right? So no matter why you go to a clinic or a doctor, they're going to take your blood pressure, your heart rate, your weight, your temperature, they're going to check your vitals. And the best way to check Bitcoin's vitals is mempool.space. And it just shows you a view of the mempool and of the blocks being mined. And again, that tells you, it shows you the fee rates. It shows you essentially all of the vital signs of the Bitcoin blockchain at that exact moment in time, which again, is helpful if you're somebody like me that you've been following it long enough that you sort of know what you're looking at. And that can tell you sort of is something wonky happening with the Bitcoin blockchain itself, which basically the answer is never, it's never like there's a threat or anything like that. It's just a question of sometimes it's, sometimes you might learn something interesting that's worth, give me 1 second here. Got to give the dog some water. Anyway, it's cool to sort of check the vitals of the Bitcoin network. So I do that at mempool.space. Another interesting resource, which is sort of, again, for those that are wonky, is there's the Crypto Fear and Greed Index. The Fear and Greed Index is basically the index for how fearful or greedy are people in general in the crypto space at that moment in time. And the website that runs that, the best way to find it is just to go on Google and type Crypto Fear Greed Index. So it's called the Crypto Fear and Greed Index, but it generally is mostly specific to Bitcoin. But anyway, the Crypto Fear and Greed Index tells you what is the mood in the marketplace at that moment in time. Now, in some ways, it's not super helpful, because one of the metrics they have that determines fear versus greed is the price of Bitcoin. So in some ways, it's sort of awkwardly self-referencing, in that if you have a metric that is tracking the price of Bitcoin as one of the inputs to fear and greed, and you want to know why the Bitcoin price is down, and you check the fear and greed index, and it tells you the price is down because fear is, we're in fearful territory. But the fearful territory is partially, I think 25% of the weighting of that is the price of Bitcoin. You end up with some circular region thing. It's like, well, people are fearful, which is why the price is down. But wait, one of the measures of whether people are fearful is the movement of the price. So it's kind of self-referencing, which is not helpful. But it is interesting in that if you're looking at like, is now a good time to buy Bitcoin or not, the Crypto Fear and Greed Index would do a good job of telling you, are you being fearful when others are greedy and greedy when others are fearful, which is the famous Warren Buffett sort of axiom of investing, is you want to be greedy when others are fearful, and you want to be fearful when others are greedy. So, that's when you know you're buying stuff that's on sale. So sometimes I'll go check I virtually always go check the mempool, because again, it's a fun way to check the vitals of the Bitcoin network. And then sometimes I'll go check the Crypto Fear and Greed Index just to see if, the marketplace by their metrics, which includes headlines and a lot of other things, if the marketplace is especially greedy or especially fearful by their metrics, which again are not super scientific or anything, but it is an interesting data point. Let me see if I missed any. So, okay, check the pricing of Coinbase, then flip over to the Stocks app, then flip over to Google and Google the word Bitcoin, then go jump on X if you've got if you follow a bunch of, Bitcoin people, which I do. You could do that. And then, for bonus, we've covered the mempool, and we've covered the Crypto Greed and Fear Index, which the website that publishes it is alternative.me. But the website sort of has a lot of pop-ups and a lot of junk on it. So it's easier to find it by Googling Crypto Fear and Greed Index and clicking on the link that leads you to alternative.me. If you go straight to alternative.me, it's some weird software site. I don't know what else they do, but it's got sort of weird pop-ups and weird ads on it. But anyway, if you go to the Crypto Fear and Greed Index, that part of it at least seems to be pretty legit because it gets reported on a fair amount. Let me see if I missed anything. That's probably it. So generally, again, I can figure out what the price is on Coinbase. I can figure out, there's a 50% chance I can figure out why it moved by checking the Stocks app. If I can't figure out why it moved by checking the Stocks app, there's at least another 50% chance of the remaining probability that I'll find out by Googling the word Bitcoin. And if I can't find out from that, there's at least another 50% chance that I will find out on X, which leaves, let's see, if there's a 50% chance, 50 and then down to 25, and then there's, 12.5, which I think leaves like a 12.5% chance that the price moves and you just never know why. Like you just, you check and nobody seems sure. Like, it's probably higher than that. I would say when I check and try to figure out the price of Bitcoin, probably 15 to 20% of the time, I can't find a good reason why it moved, which means, some Bitcoin whale somewhere got over their skis and had to liquidate for things that had nothing to do with Bitcoin, or someone somewhere just bought a bunch of Bitcoin and it pushed the price up, and nobody knows who and nobody knows why, because it had nothing to do with the broader Bitcoin network. It had to do with entirely their own objectives. So hopefully this is helpful. That is my process. So when I get on, typically when I record a video about why Bitcoin is doing what it's doing, that is the exact process I have gone through prior to recording the video, so that I am informed as to the best of my knowledge, at least, or the tools at my easy disposal, why Bitcoin is doing what it's doing. And that way I can tell you the most accurate thing of why I think the price went up or down. So anyway, and best I can tell from, the recent price, dump and then up is it's just linked to the broader stock market. The broader stock market took some huge whacks on Thursday and Friday of last week, and Bitcoin got dragged down with it. Because again, when everybody's fearful, they tend to sell everything, even if it's irrational. But I did not have much time. I've been slammed with other things at the moment. Prospera stuff is there's a lot going on at Prospera in a very good way, and that's super exciting, and major announcements we'll be able to make at some point in the future. And anyway, so, been spending a lot of time on that because that is my full-time actual day job. So Bitcoin is just all the time in between that I'm not with my family, or doing stuff with church. So anyway, hopefully that helps. Always here to serve, always here to help. And any day now, Bitcoin will get super exciting again. And it's way more fun when it's exciting than when it's sort of grinding sideways or, temporarily down. But the fun days will return, and the price will do amazing things, as it always does. And you got to relish those fun days, because usually there's, you get a small number of days of euphoria where the price becomes radically higher, and then you got to spend weeks or months grinding sideways before you get that euphoria again. So it does a good job of grinding out the people who are not serious and keeping the people who are committed. And, if you're in Bitcoin, and part of that is the long-term price appreciation, you got to enjoy the periods of euphoria because they tend to be short-lived, but then they result in the price ending up radically higher than today's price. And over time, you do that every few months or so, and you end up with, that's how you get into multi-$100,000 per Bitcoin. So have a great evening. I'm loving the slightly cooler weather as of the last couple days, and always here if you need anything on your Bitcoin journey. Have a wonderful evening. Thanks.